What is up, you guys? Welcome to Illumination Lab. My name is Justin, and today we're going to check out Greyscalegorilla's new Bioforms. In this video, we'll import our assets, set up procedural details, and play around with the lighting to help bring these Bioforms to life. I'm excited for this one. This is going to be a fun one today, so without further delay, let's get into it. Alright, so hopping into Cinema4D, I'm just going to bring in our Greyscalegorilla studio here, and what we're going to do is just hop over to models and then hop into Bioforms here. And as you can see, we have a few different Bioforms to play around with, so they have some interesting ones like this one here, but I think what we'll do is actually roll with this one. Kind of like this one quite a bit, so we're just going to import that. Next, what I'm going to do is just bring in a S-curve just to kind of have a nice backdrop here. So let me just kind of zoom in a little bit more here, and then I'm just going to bring in a Redshift camera and just bring that into the scene. And then I'm just going to hop into our perspective, move our Bioform up, and again, just kind of change our perspective here. I'm going to select our Redshift camera and then just kind of increase our focal length to about 200 here, and then just kind of reset our camera. Cool. So I think what I want to do with this one is just kind of create some sort of organic look, something like some sort of a parasitic look here. So what I'm going to do is just jump into the Redshift library here, and I'm just going to type in rock. And so we're just going to bring in some sort of rock asset here. So like a lot of mushrooms or a lot of different parasitic life forms, they kind of attach themselves to some sort of host here. So I'm just going to kind of use this rock here as what this bioform is kind of attached to or is kind of sitting on. So I'm just going to reduce down this rock here and just kind of place it near the base of our asset here. And then what I'm going to do is just bring in our Redshift render view and just kind of hop into our perspective. Next, what I'm going to do is just bring in a dome light just so we can kind of see our whole scene here with a little bit of a light source. And then I'm just going to fit to window here, and again just kind of set up our perspective. Next up, I'm just going to go back into Redshift and bring in another rock. And so I'm just going to kind of adjust this and reduce down the size. Let's see, to about here or so. We can always kind of rearrange these, but the concept for this is I want it to kind of look like we found this in some sort of cave, or we did some sort of cave diving and we kind of stumbled upon this interesting looking organism here. So I'm just going to go ahead and rotate those rocks. And then I'm just going to go into Redshift and just snag a Redshift standard material. And we're just going to place that onto our Bioform here. I'm just going to open up the node editor, and we're going to find a few different textures for this. So I'm going back into Grayscale, and they have a few different abstract textures here that I'm going to import. So I'm just going to plug this in to our weight. Actually, what I'll do instead is just bring in a color layer, and I think just plugging this into a color layer will look a little bit better here. So let me just attach that full thing and change this to difference, and then we can kind of see that texture kind of pump into our material here. So that is looking pretty good. We can always kind of play around with the scale of this, so we could reduce this to about a 0.5 by 0.5, and then you can kind of see within the render view what kind of effects that takes. So we'll probably play around with that quite a bit here just to kind of create that procedural look. Next up, I'm just going to go back into Greyscalegorilla, We're going to find a few different textures here. And I think something like this would be cool. I like a lot of the dots that it kind of has. So we're just going to kind of plug that in, and immediately you can kind of see that within the render view here. So that kind of brings a lot of really cool texture to it. Of course, we can kind of resize this to about 0.25, and that's going to help us kind of create those bigger bumps here within the asset here. So I'm liking that quite a bit. That's a pretty good foundational start. And then of course we could bring in that same texture here and then just plug that into our bump map, and then just select 0.25 for our scale as well, just so our bump kind of matches that texture that we're driving through here. So in order to see a little bit better, I'm just going to grab a Redshift tag and then turn on both geometry and displacement here, just so we can kind of see what that looks like. So looking pretty good so far. I'm just going to go back into our node editor and back into Greyscalegorilla and kind of see what they have here for different textures. I think more of these kind of spot looking textures would look nice. So I'm just going to plug that into our color layer, and then I'm just going to turn on our second and third layer here. With our second, I'm just going to change it to difference, and then our third layer, I'm just going to change that to subtract. And so as you can kind of see, all of those materials are really helping to contribute to the overall look here. I'm just going to kind of zoom in a little bit more and just try to find a interesting perspective here. And we can kind of do this a few different ways. Kind of like, let's see, kind of like about there. That'll be good for right now. We can go into our camera and turn on bokeh and just kind of put our object in here and just play with our depth of field here. Just kind of, again, kind of give us a more interesting look here, with this bioform being our focal point here within the render view. So I'm just going to kind of play around with that number real quick. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to go back into the node editor, and then really I can kind of drive up this roughness if we want, or we can kind of go down and just increase the weight of the coat here. Same with roughness too. So it all kind of depends on what overall look we want to go with. I'm just going to give it a quick save, hop into the Redshift library. I think we're going to check out to see what grass may look like around this bioform here. So again, like I said, like some sort of mushroom out in the wild or some sort of organism. I'm going to try and kind of put it into some sort of environment here by kind of placing some grass around it. So this isn't a for sure thing, but we can always see what that looks like here. So I'm just going to copy and paste, move this to about the ground here. And then I'm just going to bring in a Redshift spotlight here, and we can just kind of rotate this. And maybe by rotating, kind of playing around with some of these lights, the light itself can kind of give us a interesting look. I'm going to change this to kind of a yellow to kind of give us more of a sun look here. Of course, there's that, and then we can always kind of push this up, or we can bring this down, and we can rotate this just to kind of give it an interesting angle for our light source, just kind of rotating it there. And then what I can also do to kind of make it a little bit more interesting is just take our bioform here and then just copy and paste. And then what I can do is just reduce down the size of that second bioform here, just to kind of drive in a little bit more intrigue to this form here. I'm just going to delete that material. And then what I'm going to do is just jump over to our textures, Actually, let me just check out our materials, and they have some pretty abstract materials here, so we'll just kind of try to find some of these to bring in here. Let's try this one out just to see what it looks like. And then let's see, let me just kind of send this over and then just apply this. So immediately, not not the best look here. We can always reduce down the size to about 25%. That kind of gives us a better look, and then we can kind of reduce this down and kind of create more of a almost like a fungus look or some sort of like growth happening within this bioform here. So I kind of like that look, but I don't think the material is going to work well on this. So I think we're definitely getting somewhere for sure, but I think we should maybe just shop around for different materials here. So let me just turn off the lights here real quick so I can see my scene a little bit better. And then I'm just going to go back into our node editor, change this to, let's see, about there. I like that because it kind of drives in more of a blue and black look there, so kind of makes our bioform a little bit more intriguing here. Actually take this off, and then we'll kind of shop around for some different materials. I think maybe this one could be interesting, especially with the blue within this mint blob. That blue could probably complement the blue that we have on this bioform already. So let's just throw that on top here and just kind of see what that looks like. But before I do, I'm just going to go back into our node editor here, and I'm just going to reduce down the roughness just so we can kind of get a little bit more shine to our bioform here. So let me apply this material, and immediately within the render view, you could kind of see that fungus or molds kind of take form onto our asset here. So that is looking pretty good. However, I don't know how I feel about this grass. Let me actually just delete these, and then I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more, and then again just kind of play around with our perspective. And then what I'll actually do is just get rid of our dome light here just to make it a little bit more dramatic looking. I do like kind of the darker backdrop, so our bioform is pretty much the focal point here and kind of pops out a little bit more. And then of course what we can do just to create a different look is just kind of rotate this and see what that does here. I think about there is fine. And then I'm just going to bring this S-curve up a little bit more. Cool. So I think that is looking a little bit better. You can always just kind of play around with the exposure. But what I'll do is hop into our settings here and kind of play around with the different LUTs. So as you can see, we have a few different LUTs here, but I think maybe like a high contrast LUT would be cool, just to really help bring out both the blue and just emphasize the black material quite a bit there. So the Panasonic one here is pretty interesting. It's very similar to the last one where it's a little bit more high contrast. We have a few different Sony ones here. I'm just going to kind of turn that off for now. We can also play around with bloom, and so we can kind of create some really cool lighting effects with this bloom here. So let's actually kind of play around with that. Let me just take this spotlight here. I'm just trying to think of what we could do to make it interesting. Actually, what I'm going to do is just reduce down the curve angle and then play around with where this light source is. And what we could do is we could get multiple of these. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste our light here. And then I'm just going to move this over to about here and rotate this. And so of course with our bloom setting on, it's going to create this really nice, interesting glow here. And then what we could do is just copy and paste a few of these lights here to kind of create a interesting glow within this bioform here. And so with having multiple different light sources, this is going to actually make it look like the bioform itself is actually glowing instead of having just one specific light source. So since we have multiple light sources kind of throughout the scene, it kind of again emphasizes that the form itself is actually glowing, and this isn't light that's actually bouncing off of the form itself. So that is looking pretty good. It is a little bit blown out here, so we'll probably fix this. I'm just going to turn off all of these lights here. Let me give it a quick save. Let's hop back into our settings here, and let's figure out this LUT real quick. We have this one here. Let's see. These are a little too dark. I think I like that max zoom one. It's kind of interesting here. And then let's just really reduce down the strength of this bloom here. And I just want it to pop out a little bit, but just not have it too dramatic here. This light kind of insinuates more of a cooler look here, so I like that quite a bit. Again, just kind of reducing down the intensity, because again, we really want to push out that glow, but not have it too overwhelming here. So I think that is looking pretty good here. I'm just going to increase our output here to 25 by 16, and then of course we can kind of really kind of take this the extra step and just kind of copy and paste some of these rocks here, almost as if we found this bioform in some sort of cave or in some sort of cave dive. We kind of stumbled across this, so creating some sort of story that goes with this image would be kind of nice here. So again, just copy and pasting just to kind of create or fill the scene out a little bit more here. So but yeah, that looks pretty good. Of course, we can always kind of play around with it, but I think for this video, I think that is looking pretty good. We can always try to find some sort of different bioform or just kind of play around with it in a different way. So let's actually do that. Let's hop into another scene and see what we can do here. So all right, so I have this bioform a little bit different in its overall look, but what I really wanted was to kind of stay with that black, but kind of push in a new color here. So we pushed in a green, and then for our both background and foreground, we went more for a neutral color. So it kind of has more of a neutral tone in the back, and then we have that rock that's kind of in the foreground here. So again, with those neutral colors, we're really trying to make this black and green kind of stick out a little bit more. Of course, within this here, what we can do to make it a little bit more interesting is we can just copy and paste this form here like we did with the last one, and then we could just attach some of these interesting abstract looking materials here. So you can kind of see we have those interesting green bumps here. We can always reduce down the size, give that a different look, but I think that's not the right look here. We could put in that mint one that we did before. We could increase that size, and you could kind of see again more of that mold or algae sort of look here. So that could be interesting. We could throw in this this one here. We can reduce down the size to about 15 to make it a little bit more like prickly, like a cactus or some sort of hair almost. I just don't like the color, so what I'm going to do is just jump into our node editor, and I'm just going to disconnect our color here so we have just a plain white for now, but kind of like the direction this is going into. I'm going to reduce down the size and then just kind of put it off to the right side here. Maybe almost like how some trees will have moss on one certain side of like the tree stump or like the tree itself. We can kind of replicate that with this, just kind of having this off to the right side or to the bottom here. I'm just going to jump into Greyscalegorilla and just kind of see what kind of textures they have. I'm just going to go back into our material here and then throw in one of these textures and just attach that to our bump. And so with this, it makes it a little less glossy and it looks a little bit more organic. Of course, what we could do with this one is just apply different materials on top, which helps really drive in different colors. We do this metal one that gives it more of a metal look. So there's a lot of different ways you could kind of play around with this. You can kind of mess around with this glob here. And then we have our previous materials. So there's a lot of different directions we could go into. Let's just see here. We have this purple one that could be kind of interesting. Or this rubber one's kind of interesting. Again, kind of going more with that cactus look, kind of bringing in more of that prickly look here. And then of course what we could do is just take our previous form and rotate this and just kind of connect it here, just to make it a little bit more interesting. So what I'm going to do is just kind of rotate our camera here just to make sure that this is lining up. And again, I mentioned a cactus before, but it could be, you know, some sort of exotic fruits or something. I think what's kind of interesting is the top here does look like some sort of heart. So what we could do is we can also animate it so it kind of almost like pulsates like a heart here. Let me just kind of fix this just because we're out of focus here. Cool, but yeah, that looks a little bit better here. So, and then I'm just going to kind of rotate this, just kind of move it around and just kind of see what perspective looks the best here. And then of course we could take that same material that we had before and then just place it on top here. We could do a white, again, more of like a fungus, or we could do more of that black material, but at a different size here. So again, a lot of really interesting things to do. I think with this, what I'm going to do on top as well is just throw in some sort of light here to kind of make it interesting. But other than that, just kind of want to show you guys these bioforms. I thought they were pretty interesting here. Could do a lot of crazy stuff with it here. So let's actually hop into the wrap-up section and finish this up. All right, so jumping into the wrap-up section, we have some of our renders here. They came out to look kind of interesting here. We have both the original bioform we did and then the second one as well, both pretty interesting and different at the same time. We went in kind of two different directions here, but overall I think we kind of created a really interesting look. Definitely emphasis on the interesting. So but as far as the renders go, they turned out fine. I mean, I can always kind of play around with this and kind of enhance it a little bit more, but I think for our first couple renders, these are actually pretty good here. In our first renders, I like how dynamic it is. I like all the black and then the kind of glow that comes from it is very like bioluminescence. So that's pretty interesting. Of course, like I said before, we can always kind of play around with it a little bit more, just kind of bring a little bit more intrigue to it. But I think that is a pretty good start with that one. And then our second one here kind of came out a little interesting here. It has this green glow to it. It has this really interesting texture to it. I think what works really well within this one is it seems a lot more realistic, especially with more of like the neutral tones we went with, and the actual bioform itself looks a little bit more lifelike, more of some sort of fruit or some sort of like alien plants of some sort. So but I like both of these. They both turned out quite well for the first couple renders here. But that was pretty much it for this one. Just wanted to show you guys some of these bioforms that Greyscalegorilla just recently put out here. So hope you guys liked it. Let me know what you guys think, or if you want to see any sort of videos or any sort of focus at all, definitely let me know. We can definitely go over it. But other than that, that's the end of the video. You guys have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one.